Bitch better have my money. Pay me what you owe me. Don't act like you forgot. Hello guys, it's Revolution. In this video we are going to talk about Jiren's fall from relevancy in terms of being one of the most powerful characters in Dragon Ball. Of course we're talking about his Tournament of Power self. Now this has been a highly requested video from you guys, and I'm going to assume it's because I was heavily involved in the Broly vs Jiren Wars. I was one of the only people that said that Broly had more power than Jiren, at least amongst the Dragon Ball content creator community. Now I know a lot of you had my backs in the forums, etc. Yeah, as you all know, I got a lot of shit over saying somebody beat Jiren. Of course, we had the Broly sexuals, the Jirenettes, and it was basically a war. I think it's pretty much over now. So I guess you could kind of say that this video is a reflection on what went wrong for the people who I guess you could say cheerleaded for Jiren, and ultimately the perspective they took, which ultimately turned out to be a false dawn. So before we get down to the nitty gritty of this situation, guys, there's lots of people watching but aren't subscribed. I'm nearly at 20,000 subscribers. You could be that 20,000th subscriber. I would really appreciate it. Thank you for all your continued support. I want you guys to have your say during these videos. That's what I do this for. So please make sure you subscribe, smash that like button, and lend me your damn energy. Okay, so on to the topic of Jiren. Now, this is a sensitive subject for a few people, and Jirenettes. I know this is tough. I know you're on hard times, but I've done this nerf video for Broly before, so even if you want to claim the whole fanboy shtick, maybe that will at least give you an idea of when it comes to power scaling. I don't care which character is strongest. My favourite character is Merge Zamasu, believe it or not. And yes, am I trying to find ways to make him stronger than all the rest of the characters? Sure. Can I via power scaling? No. Can he be Hakkai'd by Beerus? No. Oops. Forgive me, back onto the topic. Okay, so Jiren. Obviously, when it came to the anime of the Tournament of Power, it took place before it took place in the manga. The anime was way ahead of the manga in terms of scheduling. The way that the anime and Toei portrayed the Tournament of Power, in particular the characters within the Tournament of Power, was vastly different from how the manga portrayed these characters. Now, it's important to note that both of these stories share the same main author, which of course is Toriyama. They are one and one of the same. They just do things slightly differently. They both follow the same backbone of a narrative, the same structure, the same through line, but they do things slightly differently. Now, it's really important to note that Toei in particular were getting notes on the Universal Survival arc way before Toyotaro was. I don't even believe Toyotaro had finished the Future Trunks arc at that point. Toei were getting these snippets of information. Who knows how detailed they were, but ultimately it allowed Toei to take their perspective of these notes and basically run with it. Toyotaro got the same later on, and of course we know from a lot of interviews now that Toriyama and Toyotaro seemingly work closer than what Toei and Toriyama did. Toriyama literally passed his bullet points of his narrative onto Toei, and then there'd be a team of writers at Toei, not just one person like it is with Toyotaro. There'd be a team of writers that kept changing throughout the anime of Dragon Ball Super, writing these stories. They had to flesh out those bullet points from Toriyama as well. Whereas if you compare and contrast the anime and the manga Tournament of Power, you can really get a sense of how much fleshed out the Tournament of Power is in the anime compared to the manga. Toyotaro seemingly rushed through it so he could get to his next arc, which was more on him as opposed to a joint anime and manga effort. But ultimately what you see in the manga are the bullet points less fleshed out than what we saw in the anime, but ultimately in a very similar order. It ultimately ends with Goku achieving Ultra Instinct and fighting against Jiren, and then Jiren being knocked out by Frieza and Goku, with Android 17 winning the tournament. Why is this important? So basically, because the anime got all this information beforehand, they may not have known the exact direction and intention of Toriyama himself, which leads me to episode 92 and the biggest factor in what eventually made people believe that Jiren is stronger than all gods of destructions. And that's important. It was the belief that Jiren was stronger than all gods of destructions, not just his own god of destruction, all of them, period. I will say this. Based on the comments from episode 92, if you'd have asked me at that time, I believe that as well. It was actually as time moved on that I stopped believing in it. I felt like they probably may have been looking to go that direction, but they changed their mind in episode 92. Well, we stated that Beerus lost in an arm wrestle to Belmod. Jiren was stronger than that God of Destruction. Jiren was stronger than Belmod, something that was repeated in the manga as well, but in a very different context. Of course, that would lead you to believe, well, therefore Jiren must be stronger than Beerus as well, which would lead you to believe he's stronger than most of the Gods of Destructions. And of course, there were arcs after this, including the Broly movie, the manga continuation with the Moro and Granola arc, where Beerus was being compared to these characters. So if you stuck to that belief and you brick-walled that belief, then of course you could scale Jiren to those heights. But like I said, it's because of those arm wrestling quotes that people believe that Jiren was stronger. Now, I did have issues with it. Even at the time, even if you'd have asked me at that time, I would have said I was 60-70% sure that Jiren was stronger than all Gods of Destructions. I'm talking about at the time of episode 92. Even then I wasn't 100% sure, and that was because of my knowledge based on strength feats in Dragon Ball. Strength feats in Dragon Ball do not necessarily equate to overall raw power in Dragon Ball. The idea of who's strongest in Dragon Ball is usually who has the most raw power. In fact, I think Dragon Ball Super, and particularly in the manga right now, is trying to vary that up. But typically, the character with this most raw power usually wins. However, raw strength is an attribute of a character's raw power. Now, it must be noted that power, the word power, has many different connotations in Dragon Ball, but I'm breaking it down into an ability of raw strength because essentially that's what you need for arm wrestling. A big reason I have doubts over this, and I do want to say, is that it can mean the reverse as well. In the Super Exciting guides, there is a training guide for Goku. It states how much stronger Goku has gotten throughout each arc and talks about the attributes which have gotten stronger throughout each arc. Now, I've put some images on your screen and I'm going to do a Super Exciting guide breakdown to go further into these very soon on the channel, which is why you must be subscribed. If you're not, hit that subscribe button. You'll get stuff that you can't get anywhere else. In the training chapter of the Super Exciting guides, like I say, it gives you a graph. It takes into account power, speed, stamina, and ki. The guide takes you throughout each arc of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and basically states how much stronger Goku has got with each attribute throughout each arc. Now, the attributes don't grow linearly in conjunction with each other. Just because you're at a certain power level doesn't mean your strength is your major attribute. It could be that you're a very fast character. Think Berta, think Dispo. You could be a character that relies more on strength even if you have a similar power level to another character. The Ginyu Force, think Jace and Raccoon, who had similar levels of power to Berta, but Berta was faster than they was. Think in the Cell Saga, where Future Trunks used grade 3 and amplified his raw strength above that of Perfect Cell's, but Perfect Cell had far more balance and far more power overall. The point I'm trying to make is an attribute within itself isn't necessarily an indicator of who has more raw power. That's why I was skeptical. The manga's depiction of this arm wrestle is that it's irrelevant. Beerus loses to this time Quitella in an arm wrestle, but Beerus states that doesn't mean he'll beat him in combat, because the indication here is that Beerus has more battle power, or he believes he has more battle power in this instance. Obviously, we go on to learn that Beerus and Quitella are two of the strongest Gods of Destructions due to the feats they produce in the Zeno exhibition match. Toyo Taro in particular heavily emphasizes Beerus is one of the strongest Gods of Destructions, and in particular goes in depth. It's almost like he consciously did this, maybe he did, was heavily indicate that Jiren was stronger than only his God of Destruction. Now, I know there's some that think all Gods of Destructions are at the same levels of power because they all somewhat survived in the Zeno exhibition match. I'm going to do a separate video on why that's not the case. That is the author, or the secondary author of the manga, basically giving his portrayal of what I've just been talking about. An attribute alone doesn't necessarily make up raw power. None of it grows linearly and in correlation to the other. So to add to the belief that Jiren was stronger than all Gods of Destructions, there's been many statements out there that say Jiren is stronger than a God of Destruction. Now, the problem with kanji is there is no plural. They don't usually use an a either, so it would actually be closer to Jiren is stronger than God of Destruction, which, if you look at it from a certain perspective, you could say that's the whole bracket of God of Destruction. that Jiren has surpassed all gods of destructions, whereas it can also mean that Jiren is stronger than a god of destruction. It can also mean that Jiren is stronger than some gods of destructions or all gods of destructions, and that's been a major sticking point with the whole Jiren debate. Now, in power scaling, you usually go for the lowest common denominator. So in this case, if you want to look at the perspective of that particular statement, you will go for he is stronger than a god of destruction. That's what you can guarantee. That's what you do in power scaling. In debating, you look more in possibilities. So you could say, well, Jiren could be stronger than all gods of destructions, and you can argue that case. Of course, with the Broly movie coming out and Broly being compared to Beerus in terms of power, that led a lot of people to think that Jiren was stronger than Broly. Of course, everyone knows what I argued in that instance, and it's not actually even as close as even I said it was. But ultimately, because of that arm wrestle in the anime, and because of the statements where people were interpreting those statements to mean all gods of destructions when they could be interpreted as meaning a god of destruction. So I think this is what caused a lot of disputes. It's really about interpretation, how you interpret those statements. Now, I'm not going to put them all on this particular video because we'll be here all day, but it wasn't only the interpretation that caused skepticism, it was the fact that there were lots of statements that just simply said Jiren matched that level of god of destruction. But obviously now we know from the quotes from Dragon Ball Superhero, Jiren isn't that different in power from Goku and Vegeta, and because Vegeta's involved in that from the Tournament of Power, it's got to refer to their blue forms, and obviously then you can scale Ultra Instinct to Jiren, so you know he's not massively stronger than them, and as we know the manga continues, Beerus is still massively stronger than the blue forms of even later arcs Goku and Vegeta. In fact, Vegeta even unlocked Ultra Ego, got stronger in the form, and still conceded that he couldn't reach the level of power that Beerus has, and that version of Ultra Ego matched the silver-haired Ultra Instinct against Granola, if not did better. So unless Beerus has been training, which really hasn't been indicated at in the story following the Tournament of Power, then Jiren just simply isn't stronger than Beerus, and therefore he isn't stronger than all gods of destruction. So going back to the interpretations of the kanji, where it could be a god of destruction or all gods of destructions, it simply means a god of destruction. As directly stated in the manga, he is stronger than Belmont. How strong is Belmont amongst other gods of destructions? Well, he can't be stronger than Beerus, and therefore Quitella, you know, he's potentially one of the weaker gods of destructions. What carried on from those interpretations of those particular kanji statements was that going into the Moro arc, until Goku achieved Ultra Instinct and we got Angel Morris, Jiren was being compared to the likes of Moro, who even at Moro 7-3 level, or even Prime Moro for example, you could argue that he was vastly stronger than the blue forms of Goku and Vegeta. Of course, a few little arguments that Goku had got weaker in Ultra Instinct started to float about. Obviously they were quelled when the official Dragon Ball website came out and stated multiple times that Goku gets stronger throughout each arc. And then of course there's a Toyotaro interview where it states Goku gets stronger throughout each arc as well. It's natural. That's always been the case throughout Dragon Ball, really. So obviously we had the big statements in the Dragon Ball Superhero movie where Vegeta states that Jiren wasn't that different in power from theirs. Obviously he must be referring to Blue Evolution because that's his major power in the Tournament of Power in both the anime and the manga. And Goku has Blue Kaioken. Now, just in case you're going to refer to the episode 110 statements from Whis in terms of saying Jiren, perhaps he's surpassed the gods of destructions, that's just typical Toei animation, leaving things very vague. Like I said, they likely get this information very early and they leave it vague because they don't know the full details yet, because Toriyama hasn't given them the full context. They leave it open, it gives them a chance to go in two different directions. Just like with the arm wrestle, they left it open because they had Beerus deny that it was a factor. Therefore, you cannot say that it was a complete retcon in that regard because it was open to interpretation, and the interpretation is simply one that arm wrestles don't actually matter. Or at least didn't matter in that regard. I'm not saying that strength feats can't amount to raw power, by the way, guys. I'm saying that it doesn't always. As I indicated earlier with the usage of the super exciting guides, strength, speed, stamina, they don't grow linearly in cohesion with the growth of ki. They grow at exponential rates, very similar to destructive capacity feats in Dragon Ball. The growth of ki, the multiplication of ki in Dragon Ball, doesn't grow linearly in terms of their destructive capacity feats, it grows exponentially. That's why a lot of people stopped using feats to scale power levels in Dragon Ball a long time ago. Now obviously the Vegeta quotes from the superhero movie indicate that Jiren wasn't that much stronger than them, and the reason the portrayal seemed to be so big was because Jiren has what I would call ultra efficiency. He's incredibly efficient with his levels of power. He's incredibly conditioned with his levels of power in comparison to Goku and Vegeta. Now, I think this concept's definitely more palatable for the manga from what we saw from the Tournament of Power, because the portrayal of Jiren in the manga isn't quite as dominant as it is in the anime. That could be for a bunch of reasons, but ultimately I think the biggest reason is, like I said earlier, the manga happened later. Toyotaro likely got more context from Toriyama. Remember, Toriyama wrote the superhero quotes from Vegeta. And Toyotaro likely knew that Beerus was still supposed to be the benchmark for Goku and Vegeta, and therefore if they'd already surpassed Jiren or matched Jiren, Beerus being the benchmark, considering he would have been weaker than Jiren, wouldn't have made any sense. But in the anime, like I mentioned, Jiren was smoking the crap out of Universe 7. A lot of people believe that Goku grew in base power throughout the Tournament of Power quite significantly, but ultimately what we really need for Jiren's power really comes in the last parts of the Tournament of Power. I would say from the moment Vegeta acquires Super Saiyan Blue Evolution and Goku uses Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 20. They're the peak of their blue powers until Goku obviously uses Ultra Instinct. And what we see from Jiren. Jiren obviously can compete with them. He is at their level. I would say that he is stronger than them in terms of raw power. Vegeta's quotes say his power isn't that different from their own. So it's not that different from their own, but there is a difference. So I would say Jiren is stronger than the strongest blue forms of Goku and Vegeta. And if they're going all out against Jiren at 100%, and Jiren, who's heavily conditioned and heavily efficient with his power, is only having to use, say, 50%, that's just me putting any number out there, guys, but using 50% of his power against these two characters that are going all out, of course, in terms of the depiction of the fight, it's going to look like a walk in the park for Jiren. So that notion can make sense, especially when you consider that percentage differences in Dragon Ball have been completely dominant before, even if they were at level powers with heightened efficiency. In terms of the depiction, the heightened efficiency user would be oozing in terms of stylistic fighting. Now, when the Broly movie came out and we got the Broly comparison to Beerus, obviously we know that Broly is somewhat comparable to a god to Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta. In terms of raw power, that would make Beerus thousands of times stronger than Super Saiyan Blue Goku and Vegeta. Being, say, 2 or 3 or 4 times stronger than Goku and Vegeta in their strongest blue forms, as Jiren might be. I'm just putting random numbers out there, guys. With his extra added efficiency and with his conditioning, you know, that's still quite a huge gap in power that they have to compete with, especially when they're having to go all out with very strenuous forms. The reason I brought up the Broly movie was because Jiren and Ultra Instinct Goku were being compared to Broly and Gogeta Blue. Look, even I made a video theorizing that Ultra Instinct Goku and Jiren could be 400 to 500 times out of Super Saiyan Blue. I don't believe that anymore. I believe he could be 2 to 4 times stronger than Blue Kaioken times 20 in the anime. It can make sense. Add on to that his efficiency at dealing with these forms. The reason the depiction would appear that he's so dominant is because, one, he's vastly stronger than them and he's better at fighting than them. Whereas you could say it's in reverse for the Broly movie. Goku and Vegeta are more efficient and better at fighting than Broly, but he's just too strong for them. But ultimately, I want to go to episode 127. It's stated that Jiren unleashes his full power, or his true power, and he fights against Blue Evolution Vegeta, albeit a tired one who's just defeated Toppo, Blue Kaioken times 20 Goku, and Android 17. Goku at this point's probably tiring as well. Android 17 shouldn't be tiring, he's an infinite model android, but he's probably around blue level anyway. He's not necessarily at Blue Kaioken or Blue Evolution levels in terms of raw power, and they all fight against Jiren. When they do a triple attack, we see Jiren has to use a barrier to deflect it, and he's visibly trying, even despite being at his true power level. That could be him just simply being extremely efficient with his power to deflect this attack. It can make absolute complete sense. It's not an out of the ordinary explanation for this situation. Jiren is stronger than them, but he doesn't waste energy by putting out more power than he needs to, whereas they're literally exerting themselves at 100%. And like I said, Vegeta was tired and Goku was tired at that point anyway. The question of has Jiren been nerfed is simply no. In terms of his depiction in the anime, the efficiency argument can make complete sense if you just interpret it as Jiren being efficient and conserving energy whilst forcing them to fight at full power. The context is there and it can make sense. Until Ultra Instinct forced him to bring out his awakened form, in which, yes, he got even stronger. The stronger than God of Destruction quotes, you can interpret them as a God of Destruction, and given the quotes from Superhero and the comparisons to Beerus, then it's likely it's just a God of Destruction. So no, he's not been nerfed in that regard. And the arm wrestle, which was another major argument, obviously, like I keep saying, there's been many different ways you can look at that arm wrestle as to what it means, and the interpretation just simply means Beerus was likely playing it down as a joke. And like I said, Toei's intention may have been to actually have Jiren stronger than all Gods of Destructions. The anime was ending. As far as Toei knew, this was going to be the final big bad villain of the anime. Obviously, the manga's continued past that point, and we've learned a lot more context around the powers these characters have. And quite simply put, we know that Beerus is stronger than Ultra Ego Vegeta, which basically makes him stronger than Jiren, especially when you take into account the quotes from the Superhero movie. However, one thing that could happen is the manga is adapting the movie. What if that changes the lines? What if that changes the lines? Then we can have this debate again. Nothing's ever solidified in power scaling. That's the important thing. It takes a scientific approach. New information brings forward new evidence. Let's see. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. That's how Jiren has fallen from relevance in terms of one of the strongest characters in the series, and why he's no longer really compared to the likes of Broly, Moro, and Granola. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. As I keep saying, have your say. I want to know your thoughts on this down in the comment section. Have I missed something that you feel that's worthy of discussion? Drop it down in the comment section. Smash that like button. Lend me your energy. Until next time, Ad Astra.